Come, let us explore the future of meditation teaching. Are you ready? Together, let us relaxingly recite. Patriarchal elitists have worked diligently to mystify the process of becoming a meditation teacher. Come, let us take a good look at the so-called man behind the curtain. In many Theravadan traditions, one has but to live as a monk for 12 years in order to be considered a teacher. In some Mahayana traditions, one could study and meditate for many years, waiting in vain for one Shifu or Roshi to appoint one a teacher. Biographies of some Zen masters tell dark tales of such pettiness and favoritism. That's weird. It's kind of looking weird and clunky right now. In the Tibetan tradition, anyone, let's fix that, who completed a retreat of 3 years, 3 months, 3 weeks, 3 days, and 3 hours was labeled as Lama. The problem with that is twofold. First, children of wealthy families could easily afford the expenses of such a retreat, whereas those of modest means could not. Many decades ago, I ate lunch with a Tibetan monk of advancing years who simply could not afford to attend retreat and thus complete his training. Many Tibetans found a workaround to this financial elitism, eschewing the monastery to whom they were required to pay rent, and living as homeless, long-haired yogis. Some of these were fortunate enough to find kind teachers, as well as survive both exposure and starvation. The second challenge to such a system is that simply doing one's time is no guarantee of acquiring the intellectual comprehension or the spiritual maturation necessary to truly be of benefit to others. An additional variable in Tibetan Buddhism are the titles of Geshe Khenpo or Khenchen, which, although could be likened to a doctorate of divinity here in the West, are less of a promise of both intellectual and spiritual mastery. And more of a commentary upon their effort, recall, and the wealth of the family. Yongjie Xuanjue's Song of Enlightenment alludes to both the 3-year apprenticeship endured by novice monks and the sad fact that not everybody benefits from such training. As humanity perches upon the precipice of ecological collapse, as well as both economic and militaristic barbarism, we stand in profound need of great meditation teachers to help folks master the secular path of peace and love. Let us forget the myths spun by institutionalism and hearken to the wisdom of proto-Buddhism. In the penultimate passage of the discourse on the 4 bases of mindfulness, the Buddha taught that his path could be mastered in as little as 7 days. The irony is that it could be easier to become a Buddha than a fully qualified Dzogchen Lama or meditation teacher. Both Malcolm Gladwell as well as Brian Tracy insist that one could master any discipline in as little as 10,000 hours. Let us consider various Let us consider various ways to sustainably train both our intellectual mastery as well as our spiritual maturity for 10,000 hours each. The key to this endeavor is the practice of informal retreat. Most students begin by attending my live streams twice daily. Whether live or recorded, depending upon one's schedule and time zone. One could begin by attending no more than 5 minutes per class. Each week we could add Each week one could add an additional 5 minutes. 5 minutes for each stream the first week. $10 minutes for each stream the second week. 15 minutes for each stream the third week. Until by the end of the 12th week, one's acclimated to comfortably attending for 60 minutes per live stream. After cruising along in this manner for a month or two, one may flirt with the notion of practicing a one-day retreat once every quarter or so. After multiple decades of experimentation, I found the following schedule to be effective and sustainable. 4:30 a.m. wake, 5 a.m. first study, 6 a.m. first meditation, 7 a.m. first break, 9 a.m. second study, 10 a.m. second meditation, 11 a.m. second break, 1 p.m. third study, 2 p.m. third meditation, 3 p.m. third break, 5 p.m. final study, 6 p.m. final meditation, 7 p.m. final break. It is imperative to make the most of the 4 sets of breaks. To connect with one's partner, children, and pets, thus ensuring their happiness and continued support of your spiritual training. Don't be surprised if your first single-day retreat is a rough ride. But every bump is an education. Listen to your body. Respect your needs. And you can make the distinctions that could enhance the pleasure and productivity of future single-day retreats. As months or maybe even years tick by, our single-day retreats could feel less arduous and more delightful. We can even find ourselves so looking forward to them that we begin to practice them 6 times annually and even monthly. This renegade Lama considers a bodhisattva to be merely one who feels defined by the mindfulness and meditation, and a monastic to simply be an individual who lives as if on personal retreat. During one's first 3.5-year retreat, spent collecting their 5,000 hours of formal study and 5,000 hours and additional 5,000 hours of formal practice, one could be considered an apprentice Lama. During the second 3.5-year retreat, when one is completing their 10,000 hours of formal study and additional 10,000 hours of formal meditation, One could be known as a journeyman Lama. Once one has completed their second retreat and has demonstrated intellectual mastery as well as spiritual maturity, one could rightly be described as a master Lama. Most people do not have the time and finances to live as if on retreat for 7 consecutive years. If one merely studied for an hour and then meditated for an additional hour every morning, and likewise studied and meditated every evening, then one could become a Master Lama in 14 years. Sadly, the United States of America has outlawed homelessness, forcing full-time meditation students to find a job, find a patron, or practice in prison. There are many Theravadan and some Mahayana monasteries in North America. Most of them are bastions of Yang's religious patriarchy. And as such, take a dim view to those who are determined to walk the path of being flexible, loving, rational, laid-back, lucid, egalitarian, cooperative, and kind. The author of this book is quite disabled and supports himself with the help of his domestic partner and by relying on Medicare as well as Social Security disability. Over the past 26 centuries since the Buddha Over the past 26 centuries since the Buddha, there have been times and places where it was sometimes more easy and other times more difficult to become a Master Lama. Regardless of one's age, health, gender, language, or land, a minority of folks have become Master Lamas. I'm happy to help you however I can, through free videos, live streams, and books. That you too could help others to master the Buddha's path of mindfulness and meditation. Having completed this morning's opening lesson, it could be time for us to shift gears. It is Ahsoka Tano Thursday morning. Come, let us meditate like a Jedi after approximately 30 seconds of housekeeping. This is the Dzogchen Lama Jigme Gyatso of the Buddha Joy Meditation School. For more than 30 years, I have harnessed the Buddhas. For more than 30 years, I've harnessed my autistic special interests, as well as my ADHD hyperfocus, to spend about 8 hours a day, almost every day, studying, practicing, mastering, and reverse engineering the teachings and techniques of each school of meditation so that I could become your personal, nerdy, neurodivergent guide to nirvana. Welcome, my friends, to Meditate Like a Jedi, which is made possible due to the generosity of viewers just like you. For the remainder of this morning's live stream, let's play with the very latest iteration of very easy meditation practice text, or sadhana, if you're nasty. Sturgeon's law reminds us that 90% of everything sucks. What could that look like? Well, that could look like teachers, people, including meditation teachers, being more enthusiastic to be rigid than flexible, fearful than loving, superstitious than rational, controlling than laid back. Being more enthusiastic to be elitist than egalitarian, cryptic than lucid, competitive than cooperative, cruel than kind. Therefore, it should come as little surprise that the majority of so-called meditation teachers implore their students to actively focus and actively, what's the word I'm looking for? Analyze. Now, the only way to perform these actions is to rely upon discrete neural pathways, such as those found in the medial prefrontal cortex or dorsolateral prefrontal cortex. Doing so, number one, can exhaust our prefrontal cortex, which increases the likelihood of us developing the symptoms of depression. In addition, exhausting our prefrontal cortex triggers our amygdala, which is the seat of both the anxiety and aggression that are the polar opposites of the peace and the love that most of us hope to get from mindfulness and meditation. Fortunately, neither the prefrontal cortex nor the amygdala constitute the entirety of our central nervous system. Case in point, every time we inhale, we are wired to automatically access the sympathetic nervous system ensconced within the middle third of our spinal cord. This bad boy has evolved to help us to notice in a very special way. It has evolved to help us notice vulnerably, passively, viscerally, randomly, and fleetingly, which is the opposite of concentration. Similarly, every time we exhale, we're wired to automatically access our parasympathetic nervous system, divided between the lower third and the upper third of the same spinal cord. This parasympathetic nervous system has evolved to help us to both physically relax as well as mentally release to such a degree that which we noticed during our previous inhalation could fleetingly feel less stressful, less permanent, and even less defining. A great example of the influence of patriarchy on our culture is the fact that the majority of Buddhist statues depict the Buddha as sitting in a full lotus posture. However, the most ancient Buddhist statuary reflects not the full lotus posture, but merely the quarter lotus posture, where one's leg is stacked flat upon another leg, kind of like the two pieces of bread in a sandwich. Now, to assume this position, we don't want to force the knees to articulate. Remember, the knees are just hinge joints. It is the hips that are ball joints, and it's from our hips that our the flexibility required to assume this position is found. Now, the first time we try to assume this position, we'll very likely perform an asymmetric and ungainly analog, and that's okay. Don't force anything. Just relax as best you can for as little as 5 minutes every 12 hours. And within a week or two, you'll find your body is able to recapture a surprising degree of the flexibility of its youth. So now that we know the danger of competing, the danger of using focus and analysis to compete against our sympathetic as well as parasympathetic nervous systems, what is the most efficient manner we can use to actually cooperate with the same sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system? Simple. During our inhalation, we could silently and mentally recite the verb watch, and during our exhalation, we could silently and mentally recite the verb ease. Now, if you prefer, we can play with a 6-syllable version of the same exercise, silently and mentally reciting watching the play of mind during our inhalation, and silently and mentally reciting ease into mind's nature during our exhalation. Together, let us practice. And remember, the moment you have a specific question about Buddhist philosophy or meditation, do not hesitate to type your question in great detail in the chat window, for I tend to check for questions approximately once every 15 minutes or so. The iconography of this particular archetype can remind us of the Buddha's path. This woman, the color of a cumulus cloud, could be described as the all-good mother, or Samantabhadri, or Kuntuzong Mo. She reminds us, her nudity reminds us that the key to that every time we inhale, we are wired to notice vulnerably, passively, viscerally, randomly, and fleetingly. Her partner, who could be described as the all-good father, or as Samantabhadra, or as Kuntuzong Po, is the color of the infinite azure sky. He reminds, and his coloring reminds us that as we relax into our exhalation, whatever we noticed during our previous inhalation could feel as if it was as non-graspable as a vast empty void, like the illusion of the infinite azure sky on a bright and beautiful cloudless morn, which, although could be tantalizing to the eye, is non-graspable to the hand. Their beauty reminds us that the highest love is spontaneous and uncontrived, and the byproduct of mindfulness and meditation. The stability with which he sits reminds us of centeredness. The abandon with which she sports in tantric union reminds us of spontaneity. Love's centered spontaneity is the byproduct of mindfulness and meditation. And the key to the effortless effort of right effort, which is the sixth fold of the Buddha's Eightfold Path. The transience of a cumulus cloud, which can cross the sky, can seem to cross the sky and then seem to be gone, reminds us of impermanence, the first fold of the Buddha's Eightfold Path. You have taken your first step into a much larger world. If you feel that I have earned it, you could give this live stream a thumbs up. You could even help support this channel. In approximately 11 hours, I would very much like to return to lead today's evening meditation class, as well as group practice. And if you are as geeky as me, may the Force be with you always.